The day humanity was admitted into the Galactic Concord, Earth celebrated like never before. Cities lit up with fireworks. Oceans shimmered with bioluminescent flotillas. Even a moon bore a massive holographic welcome banner projected in alien script, courtesy of a few creative engineers and some borrowed laser satellites. On the Concord's central world, however, the mood was very different. In a vast, vaulted hall, lined with floating crystalline data, obelisks, and alien ambassadors seated in tiers, a single human delegate stood proudly in front of the Concord High Librarian. He wore a sharp suit and an expression that teetered between smug and oblivious. His name tag read simply, Ambassador Daniel Fry, Earth. The librarian, a translucent being of shifting prisms known as Usrith, floated forward and intoned, Humanity of Earth. In accordance with Article 12 of the Concord Charter, you are granted provisional membership. However, before you are allowed to fully participate in galactic trade, diplomacy, and security operations, you must first acknowledge the banned list. Fry raised an eyebrow. The what list? A hush fell over the chamber. The only sound was the faint hum of the obelisks recalibrating. Usrith extended a long, crystalline limb and gestured to a colossal holographic scroll that materialized in the air. It began to unroll slowly, stretching from the chamber's ceiling all the way down to the marble floor, then spilling past Fry's shoes and continuing to unfurl across the tiles. The text shimmered in a dozen languages at once, with annotations in glowing red. The banned list, Usrith explained, is a catalog of approximately 12,000 devices, substances, and technologies that the Concord has deemed too dangerous, unstable, or morally unacceptable to permit within civilized galactic society. Fry peered at it. 12,000? Correct, said Usrith with quiet authority. Your world's compliance with these prohibitions is non-negotiable. We are surprised that your civilization has reached your current level of advancement despite your casual use of so many of these forbidden implements. Fry squinted at the first few entries and began reading aloud. Item number 1. Improvised internal combustion engine. Illegal. Item number 4. Microwave radiation emitter. Dangerous. Item number 22. Duct tape. Duct tape. Banned. Why? Usrith shimmered, sounding faintly scandalized. The substance you call duct tape has been classified as a Class 3 adaptive binding agent, with applications in restraint, sabotage, and pressure sealing. It is unconscionable that your species would utilize such an unstable and unstandardized material to seal vacuum breaches on StarCraft. At this, Fry chuckled. Oh, that? Yeah, you just double wrap it and give a good push. Holds air just fine. Several of the alien delegates murmured in alarm. One even fainted. Unperturbed, Fry scrolled down a little more. Item number 67. Electric kitchen blender? Wait, what? Who bans a blender? Usrith leaned closer. During an attempted coup in the Vale Nebula colonies, your people weaponized blenders by rigging them to liquefy fuel cells and scatter molten debris at enemy combatants. The resulting carnage was widely broadcast. Blenders are now prohibited from Concord military installations. Fry paused, then smiled faintly. Yeah, that sounds like us. And then he saw it. Item number 413. Rubber bands. Usrith bristled. Capable of powering deadly projectile devices or sabotaging precision machinery. The fact that your kind keeps them casually in drawers is... It paused, searching for words. Barbaric. Fry chuckled again, scratching his chin. Barbaric? Nah. Resourceful. And that word, resourceful, seemed to echo through the chamber like a stone dropped into water. The librarian visibly stiffened. Ambassador Fry, we must be clear. The ban list is not negotiable. Every item on this list has, at some point in galactic history, contributed to catastrophe. It is by consensus and bloodshed that this compendium exists. You will refrain from using these devices in any capacity, or you risk revocation of your membership and sanctions upon your planet. Fry nodded solemnly, but his eyes sparkled with mischief. Got it. No duct tape. No blenders. No. Paperclips, I'm guessing. He scrolled down the list until he found it. Item number 927. Metallic paper fasteners, aka paperclips. Wow, Fry muttered. What did those poor little guys ever do? A tentacled ambassador from the fourth tier leaned forward and hissed. They were used by the Breath insurgents to override starship navigation relays and disable a fleet. Entire planets lost in an instant. With paperclips, Fry whistled, impressed. Well, that's just good engineering. The librarian sighed deeply. You don't seem to grasp the gravity of this. But the truth was Fry did grasp it, just differently than they expected. To humans, the banned list wasn't just a catalog of hazards. It was a testament to their brilliance. Every entry was proof that they could take something simple, something overlooked, and turn it into a solution no one else would dare attempt. That was humanity's gift and their curse. Fry finally looked up from the shimmering scroll and addressed the chamber. Look, I appreciate that you all had some rough times with these things. But where we come from, half our victories, hell, half our lives, were held together with duct tape and stubbornness. You ban everything that can hurt you, we figure out how to make it work for us. He folded his arms and grinned. That's why we're here, isn't it? The room fell silent. Even the librarian didn't reply right away. Instead, it slowly rolled the holographic scroll back up, its crystal edges faintly glowing with something that might have been respect or dread. We will allow Earth to retain provisional membership, Usrith finally declared. But the use of any item on this list, any misuse, in violation of Concord law will result in immediate expulsion. Fry gave a little mock salute. Understood. But as he turned to leave, Fry couldn't help but glance back at the towering obelisks, at the glowing list of forbidden ingenuity, and at the horrified faces of the alien delegates. And he thought, we're just getting started. Back on Earth, news of the banned list sparked equal parts outrage and amusement. Headlines read, Aliens ban duct tape, Earth laughs. Paperclips of mass destruction, Blender Wars. What they don't want you to know. Within hours, engineers, students, and hobbyists began compiling stories, designs, and schematics of every human misuse they could remember. Social media exploded with hashtag Library of Misuse hashtags. People proudly posted photos of their most ridiculous but effective hacks. A plunger sealing an airlock, a plastic fork jury-rigged into a lockpick, an espresso machine converted into a high-pressure steam cannon. And soon, someone began compiling it all into an actual archive. A new wiki went live that evening. The Library of Misuse. Humanity's greatest hits. Across the galaxy, Concord officials monitored the activity in disbelief. Aliens whispered in fear. And quietly, deep in the archives of the High Library, the name Humanity was amended on the rolls. Species of concern, resourceful, unpredictable, extremely dangerous. And on Earth, Ambassador Fry raised his glass to the stars and murmured, Cheers to the ban list. You haven't seen anything yet. News of Earth's Library of Misuse spread like wildfire. To some in the Galactic Concord, it was a curiosity, an amusing, if disturbing, quirk of humanity. To others, it was heresy. And to a few, it was an opportunity. One such opportunist was the warlord Krythak of the Yolari Swarm, commander of the dreaded Carapace Armada. To Krythak, humans were nothing more than an upstart species, tolerated only because of their novelty. Their recent admission to the Concord was, in his mind, a mistake, one he intended to correct. He chose to strike at Vanguard 3, humanity's fledgling colony in the Icarus Belt. Barely a decade old, the colony was little more than a dusty mining outpost strung across a series of rocky planetoids, its defenses laughably sparse by Concord standards. Krythak reasoned it would be a swift, brutal example, a warning to all species who dared to flaunt the rules of the banned list. But Krythak, like so many before him, underestimated humanity. It started with a shimmering black blot on the edge of the Vanguard 3 sky. The Carapace Armada, descending like a storm. On the colony's central command platform, Administrator Leah Torres watched the Yolari ships blot out the stars. She was a civil engineer by training, not a soldier, and she felt the weight of that now as alarms howled around her. The comms crackle with Krythak's voice, oily and triumphant. Humans of Vanguard 3, you stand accused of violations of the ban list. Your misuse of forbidden devices and techniques threatens galactic stability. Surrender now, and we will spare your lives. Leah switched the comm off before he finished. Around her, the handful of malicious soldiers fidgeted nervously. Their colony had no weapons capable of piercing the Alari's shields, no warships in orbit, and no time for reinforcements. Leah tapped her fingers against her clipboard, thinking fast. Then she smiled grimly. "Give me every mechanic, miner, and kitchen worker we've got," she ordered. "And bring everything you can find from the supply closets." "Everything? Everything?" one of the militia asked. "Everything," Leah repeated. "You don't beat humans by taking away their weapons. You just make us more creative." Over the next hour, the humans of Vanguard 3 transformed their mining colony into a death trap. In a processing plant, they jury-rigged industrial blenders into a battery of molten or sprayers, rigging them to pressure tanks with hoses snaked through the tunnels. In the hydroponics bay, they repurposed gardening drones into a swarm of mobile, blade-tipped saboteurs, each programmed with simple seek-and-puncture routines. They stripped insulation from wiring, coiled it into makeshift electromagnetic whips. They lashed together scaffolding into crude catapults to hurl canisters of reactive chemicals. Paperclips, duct tape, and zip ties became traps, locks, and tripwires. Even the kitchen staff got involved, boiling vats of high-pressure steam that they aimed at the airlocks, ready to scald any intruders who broke through. Leah oversaw it all, her voice calm and sharp as she moved from station to station. "It doesn't have to be perfect," she reminded them. "It just has to work." The Alari began their assault at dawn, deploying troops in gleaming armor to storm the colony. The first squad landed at the main airlock and immediately tripped a web of tripwires strung with cutlery, which sparked and fused their visors. Blinded and panicked, they stumbled forward into a stream of molten or sprayed from repurposed blenders, which hardened around their legs and immobilized them. Another squad cut their way into the hydroponics bay, only to be shredded by dozens of gardening drones screaming through the air like furious metallic hornets. The Alari opened fire, but the drones were too small and too fast, darting into armor joints and wires. In the tunnels, Alari soldiers encountered catapults that launched chemical canisters into their midst, clouds of noxious, sticky vapor that gummed up weapons and clogged their breathing filters. The militia, armed with nothing more than pipe wrenches, electromagnetic whips, and sharpened rebar, struck from the shadows. By the time Krythak himself descended to the surface to oversee the assault, his forces were already faltering. He stormed into the command platform, roaring threats, and stepped squarely onto a polished sheet of kitchen foil, which had been greased and rigged as a frictionless trap. He crashed to the floor in a heap of flailing limbs and shattered dignity. Leah Torres stood above him, arms crossed. "I tell you to leave," she said dryly, "but it looks like you've already started." Within hours, Krythak's forces were in full retreat. Everywhere they turned, they found more human traps, more Misuse tools turned into weapons of opportunity. Even their flagship in orbit was sabotaged. Mining lasers fired from the ground in a coordinated pattern, striking vulnerable sensor clusters and forcing the ship to withdraw. By the end of the day, the battered remains of the Carapace Armada fled Vanguard 3, leaving behind a field of scorched earth, broken armor, and an unnerving silence. The humans emerged from their tunnels and hideouts, bruised but alive. Cheers echoed through the dusty air. Leah wiped her hands on her overalls and called out, "All right, people, let's get this place cleaned up. And someone put the blenders back in the kitchen." News of the battle reached Concord space before the Alari even made a home. Hollow vids of humans welding blenders into weapons, flinging soup cans from catapults, and disabling elite soldiers with little more than duct tape and determination went viral overnight. Other species were aghast. On Concord news networks, analysts debated furiously. How did they win? What sort of people turns a food processor into a death ray? They were unarmed. How? One commentator summed it up bluntly. You can ban a weapon. You can't ban imagination. Across the galaxy, the humans' library of Misuse saw a dramatic spike in visitors. Downloads of Vanguard siege tactics became the most pirated document in Concord history. Smugglers and revolutionaries alike began copying the techniques, sparking a wave of uprisings across fringe worlds. In the High Library itself, Usrith the librarian reviewed the footage with growing alarm. They whispered to themselves, "What have we unleashed?" On Vanguard 3, the humans held a quiet memorial for those lost, and then went right back to work. Blenders were scrubbed clean and returned to kitchens. Gardening drones resumed trimming lettuce and cucumbers. Catapults were disassembled and stored. But something had changed. The humans had proven themselves. Not just to the Ilari, but to the galaxy. Leah received a message that evening from Ambassador Fry himself. It was short and very human. "Heard about the siege. Well done. You just wrote the next chapter in the library. Keep going." She smiled, watching the stars. "Oh," she murmured, "we're just getting started." And so the legend of humanity grew. A species that could turn anything, everything, into a weapon or a solution. A species that could never truly be disarmed. For on Vanguard 3, the galaxy learned the truth about humans. If you take away their weapons, they'll just build better ones out of whatever's lying around. For a while after the first siege of Vanguard 3, things grew quiet. Quiet, but not calm. Across the galaxy, whispers of humanity's strange victory over the Ilari spread. Footage of duct-taped airlocks, gardening drones wielding sharpened trowels, and boiling kitchen steam assaults flooded Concord networks. Some dismissed it as propaganda. Others marveled. But everyone agreed on one thing. Humans were dangerous. And then the humans doubled down. It began with a broadcast. A plain screen lit up in the Galactic Commons with a single human phrase, translated into hundreds of tongues. Knowledge belongs to everyone. The image cut to a familiar figure. Ambassador Daniel Fry, the same man who had stood before the Concord librarian months earlier. This time, however, he stood inside an enormous cavern, its walls lined with glowing data nodes and human engineers bustling in the background. Fry adjusted his tie, grinned, and spoke. "Ladies, gentlemen, assorted life forms, welcome to the Library of Misuse." Behind him, a massive holographic tree unfurled, its branches lined with thousands of glowing leaves, each one labeled with the name of a seemingly innocent device and the countless ways humans had reimagined it. "We've compiled our knowledge of creative misuse into one place," Fry continued. "Every trick, every hack, every upside-down, inside-out, last-ditch miracle we've ever pulled off is now public. If you want to know how to turn a salad spinner into a centrifuge or a fax machine into a cyber attack vector, it's all here." He gestured to the tree, and the leaves shimmered as thousands of alien viewers logged in simultaneously, their curiosity overcoming their caution. Fry winked. "You're welcome." And with that, the Library of Misuse went live. The response was immediate and chaotic. At first, alien engineers, rebel groups, and students treated it as a curiosity. They laughed at the ingenuity. The improvised rope bridges made from plastic wrap, the orbital sensor blinders crafted out of kitchen foil, the sophisticated hacking of starship cores with nothing more than rubber bands and static charge. But soon the laughter stopped. On the icy mining moon of Petros, workers used the library to escape a collapsing tunnel by fashioning emergency harnesses out of chair legs and elevator cables, just as the library described. On the oppressed colony of Viren 6, revolutionaries toppled a garrison of Concord peacekeepers by creating decoys out of mannequins, holographic projectors, and mirrored foil, all strategies drawn from the human archives. On distant worlds where medicine was scarce, entire clinics sprang up using modified bread makers as sterilization chambers, soda bottles as foredrips, and duct tape, of course, for splinting and sealing. In less than a month, over 1 billion entries in the library had been accessed, and the galaxy was never quite the same. The Concord was furious. The High Librarian Usrith summoned Fry to a private meeting in the great crystalline library. They floated above him, prisms flaring an angry red as Fry sat cross-legged on a bench, perfectly calm. "You have weaponized knowledge," Usrith accused, their voice sharp. "The library of Misuse is destabilizing entire sectors. You have given rebels the tools to resist lawful authority. Entire military doctrines are being rewritten in response to paperclips." Fry tilted his head, feigning innocence. "You're welcome." Usrith flared brighter. "We ordered you to cease using banned technologies, not to teach the galaxy how to misuse them." "Ah, but we're not using them," Fry countered smoothly. "We're educating." "You said nothing about education." For a long moment, Usrith simply glowed silently, unable to refute him. Finally, they hissed, "This will not end well for you." Fry just smiled. "It never does. That's the fun of it." As the weeks rolled on, things began to spiral. Underground markets in the Galactic Core began selling library packages, complete kits to execute some of the more outlandish human techniques. Rebel starter sets containing duct tape, foil, dental floss, and a printed copy of the Vanguard Siege Playbook became a bestseller. One particularly ingenious species, the Phylox, turned an entire freighter into a mobile workshop dedicated to recreating and selling human misuse devices. They called it the Rolling Human, and their slogan was, "We make what humans imagine." Even Concord military forces couldn't ignore the effectiveness of the library. Some began adopting human techniques themselves, quietly hiring human advisors under the table to train their forces in creative compliance. And all the while, the library continued to grow, fed by submissions from humans and aliens alike. For many downtrodden species, the library was more than just a collection of tricks. It was a manifesto. On the swamp world of Drinax, a group of enslaved workers used its guidance to sabotage their master's machinery with nothing but broom handles, glass bottles, and determination. The footage of their victory was broadcast across the galaxy, and for the first time, "Chance of we misuse, therefore we win," began echoing in alien protests. Some Concord officials tried to shut down the library, deploying hackers, sending Black Ops teams to seize its servers, even sabotaging human data centers. But it never worked. The library simply migrated, reappearing on a new server, a new asteroid, a new hidden node. Humans had designed it like everything else, redundantly, cleverly, and impossible to eradicate. Leah Torres, now one of the administrators of the library, explained it best during a clandestine interview. "You can't unteach creativity. You can't ban ingenuity. We just gave the galaxy permission to see it differently." One evening, back in the library's hidden cavern, Fry and Leah stood together, watching the branches of the holographic tree sway under the weight of billions of users. Leah raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll ever forgive us for this?" Fry chuckled. "No, and that's how we know it worked." She smirked. "You think the Concord will stop us?" Fry's grin widened. "Oh, they could try. But the galaxy's already learned the one thing they can't unlearn." He pointed to the tree, its leaves shimmering with the names of devices and strategies. Clothes hanger, starship lockpick. Blender, molten or cannon. Rubber band, data wiper. And at the top, glowing brightest. Imagination, unbannable. Far above, in the quietest chamber of the High Library, Usrith stood before a smaller holographic tree, one they kept hidden from the public. They studied its growing branches with quiet dread, and though they would never admit it, a small shard of admiration glimmered in their crystalline core. Perhaps, they murmured softly, we were wrong. They touched one of the leaves, toothbrush, circuit jumper, and shook their heads slowly. Perhaps this is not misuse at all, but mastery. Thus the library of misuse became something greater than humanity ever intended. It became not just a collection of clever hacks, but a symbol of resistance, creativity, and the refusal to let any rule, law, or convention snuff out the spark of ingenuity. And somewhere deep in the galaxy, Fry's voice echoed in 100 tongues. "You can ban the tools. You can ban the devices. But you'll never ban us." The library of misuse had become too powerful. At first, the Concord dismissed it as a nuisance, a human sideshow that would burn itself out. But it didn't burn out. It burned brighter. Within months, entire sectors had descended into chaos as oppressed populations rose up, corporations toppled, and galactic militaries were humiliated, all using human misuse tactics downloaded from the library. The librarian Usrith watched helplessly as holographic maps lit up in angry red blotches. Uprisings here, sabotage there, a fleet immobilized with nothing more than fishing line and bubble wrap over there. Enough was enough. The Concord Security Council convened an emergency session. "We cannot allow this library of misuse to continue," barked a hulking ZRYNN general. "Is a destabilizing influence," shrieked an insectoid diplomat. "It is human," hissed another, as though the word itself was a curse. After hours of debate, they passed Resolution 77.1, immediate confiscation of all banned devices from human hands, seizure of library servers and associated data, arrest of all human engineers involved, containment of Earth and its colonies pending investigation. By dawn, the Concord fleet surrounded Earth, Vanguard 3, and the library's known outposts. Armored envoys landed in major human cities. Entire battalions marched through the streets, stripping workshops and homes of dangerous materials. They confiscated duct tape, paperclips, rubber bands, foil, forks, fans, spools of wire. Even the kitchen blenders were ripped from homes and sealed in shimmering energy crates. And still, the humans stood there watching quietly. No panic, no protest, just quiet smiles. One young Concord lieutenant noticed it and muttered uneasily, "Why are they smiling?" On Vanguard 3, Administrator Leah Torres and Ambassador Daniel Fry sat across from each other in a containment cell. Both wore the standard gray detention jumpsuits. Both still smiled faintly. "You'd think," Leah said lightly, "that after all this time they'd have learned." Fry smirked. "That's the problem with the Concord, Leah. They think disarming us means defeating us." He glanced down at his hands, idly playing with the cuff of his sleeve. "They never understood," he added. "We are the weapon." 2 days into the crackdown, the Concord began loading confiscated items into massive transport ships. The largest ship, CSS Judicator, held hundreds of crates of human contraband bound for a secure facility deep in the Orion Vale. On the bridge of the Judicator, Captain RYSS barked orders as the final crates were sealed below deck. "Scan everything twice. If even a single toothpick gets loose in here, I'll have someone's mandibles." The first sign of trouble came 6 hours into the journey. Alarms blared. Lights flickered. Doors locked and unlocked seemingly at random. Environmental systems vented harmless steam into hallways. Except it wasn't harmless. It was being directed deliberately, corroding sensitive circuits. Security teams rushed to the hold and found one of the confiscated crates, open, and from it spilled 1,000 little nightmares. Dozens of wind-up toys, skittering down corridors and jamming doors. Rubber bands snapping across control panels, shorting them. A kitchen blender somehow plugged into a wall socket and spraying hot oil onto the floor, turning passageways into slick traps. Foil blankets layered over security cameras. Paperclips lodged into magnetic locks, holding them open. A single disposable fork embedded in the captain's chair cushion, sharp side up. Within the hour, the Judicator was dead in space. The crew evacuated in escape pods as the ship's intercom system, hijacked, played a cheerful human song on loop. "If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands." From the window of their detention cell on Vanguard 3, Leah watched the Judicator drift by, its lights dark, its crew fleeing. She turned to Fry. "Is it time?" He grinned. "It's time." Across Earth, Vanguard 3, and dozens of human outposts, the containment breach unfolded like clockwork. In detention centers, prisoners snapped hidden shoelaces into tripwires, yanked apart beds to create levers and pry bars, and used cafeteria trays to reflect laser sensors back at themselves, tricking security into opening doors. On Earth, engineers hidden in internment zones activated harmless garden gnomes planted months earlier, which unfolded into compact transmitters, jamming Concord comms. At the Concord command post in Geneva, a janitor, who no one had suspected, rolled his cleaning cart into the server room, locked the door, and proceeded to rewire the room with nothing more than coat hangers and a jug of soapy water. Within minutes, the entire command grid went offline. In orbit, human technicians who had been forced to work on Concord vessels simply took off their belts, slipped a few metal clips between circuits, and shut entire warships down. By the time the Concord realized what was happening, it was already over. Leah and Fry emerged from their cell to find the detention block in chaos. Concord guards slipped and skidded across marbles scattered across the floor, blinded by bursts of flash powder hidden in hollowed-out pens. Leah calmly retrieved a confiscated hydrospanner, still smudged with kitchen grease from a fallen crate. She handed it to Fry. "Let's go home." As they walked through the halls, human engineers and miners joined them, each armed with whatever they could improvise. Chair legs, sharpened toothbrushes, ropes of bedsheets. They reached the landing pad to find a Concord dropship waiting, now painted with a crude but proud banner. Human Express, Galactic Delivery. Fry chuckled as they boarded. "You really can't stop us." By the time the Concord regained control of their facilities, the humans were gone. Every single one. Not just from the prisons, but from the internment camps, the confiscation zones, the impound yards. Even the seized crates of contraband were missing. In their place, the Concord found handwritten notes stuck to walls, screens, and doors, each written in a dozen languages, but carrying the same message. "You can ban our tools. You can ban our toys. But you'll never cage our minds." Humanity. And then came the broadcast. It lit up every Concord channel simultaneously. Fry appeared, seated on a crate of confiscated blenders, with Leah standing beside him. "To our friends in the Concord," Fry began, "we appreciate the hospitality, but we're afraid your containment plan failed." Leah added, "You can take away our gadgets, but you'll never take away what makes us human, the ability to turn anything into everything." Fry smiled warmly. "You'll find your ships returned to you, mostly intact. We left a few upgrades. You're welcome." Leah winked at the camera. "Oh, and check your blenders." The feed cut to black. In the high library, Usrith watched the playback over and over, silent. On their desk lay a single human-made paperclip, left behind deliberately. It was bent into the shape of a key. Usrith turned it over in their crystalline fingers and finally murmured, "You can't lock them out, because they'll just pick the lock." And far from the prying eyes of the Concord, in a hidden asteroid station buzzing with activity, the humans celebrated. The library of Misuse had grown larger than ever, its branches shimmering with 100,000 new entries from grateful aliens inspired by humanity's ingenuity. Leah raised her glass. "To the breach." Fry clinked his own against hers. "To the humans who can't be contained." For the first time in galactic history, an entire civilization had slipped through the fingers of the most powerful government in the stars, using nothing but scraps, wit, and a stubborn refusal to obey. And the galaxy was beginning to understand. If you try to box in humanity, they'll just turn the box into a spaceship. The breach humiliated the Galactic Concord. For all their fleets, laws, and centuries of doctrine, they had been outwitted by a species armed with shoelaces, forks, and an imagination they couldn't predict, much less control. For a while after the containment collapse, the galaxy braced for war. Some predicted an all-out extermination campaign against Earth. Others called for quarantining the humans on their homeworld indefinitely. Still others argued for banishing them beyond the rim of known space. But none of those things happened, because deep down, the Concord knew if they pressed humanity again, they might lose everything. And so, reluctantly, and for the first time in its long and rigid history, the Concord adapted. On a quiet morning in Geneva, Leah Torres stood at the edge of Lake Lehman, skipping stones and wondering when the other shoe would drop. It didn't take long. A familiar shimmer of light signaled an incoming transmission, and a crystalline projection of librarian Usrith appeared in the air above the water. This time, their facets glowed not red with anger, but a muted, cautious blue. "Administrator Torres," Usrith began. "Librarian Usrith," Leah replied coolly, tossing another stone. There was an awkward pause. A strange thing for a being who had always spoken with supreme authority. "We misjudge your species," Usrith finally admitted. The Concord's assumptions about misuse, about unpredictability, were based on fear. And fear, they added almost reluctantly, is limiting. Leah stopped skipping stones and turned to face the projection. "So," she asked evenly, "what do you want?" The librarian's facets flickered faintly. "We want you to teach us." Months later, in a cavernous Concord assembly hall, Ambassador Daniel Fry stood at a podium before the largest audience he'd ever seen. Delegates from hundreds of worlds sat in tense silence, their holographic notes glowing before them. And yet, everywhere Fry looked, he saw something new in their alien faces. Not just fear, curiosity, even admiration. He leaned forward and spoke. "For thousands of years, you've treated creativity as a liability," he began. "You banned tools that could be misused. You outlawed imagination itself. You thought that if you took away the dangerous toys, no one would get hurt." He held up a battered, bent paperclip. "But danger doesn't come from tools. It comes from how you think." There was a ripple of murmurs through the chamber. "Humans misuse things," Fry continued, "because we refuse to accept that things only have one purpose. We refuse to see a rule as the end of the story. And that's what's made us resilient. That's what's kept us alive." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "So now, you're asking us to write a new doctrine, a doctrine of responsible misuse, to teach you what we know without destroying yourselves in the process." The holographic tree of the Library of Misuse blossomed above his head, its branches shimmering with countless leaves. "We'll teach you how to turn plowshares into swords, and back again, how to turn fear into fuel, how to turn failure into ingenuity." He smiled faintly. "We'll teach you how to think like humans." And the chamber, slowly, reluctantly at first, erupted in applause. The first school of responsible misuse was established in orbit over Vanguard 3, housed in a massive converted mining platform that humans had originally rigged as an emergency colony ship. Now, it bore a new name etched in every galactic tongue: the Library School. Students came from every corner of the galaxy. Engineers, scientists, soldiers, even politicians, all eager to learn the forbidden ways of human ingenuity. Leah stood at the front of the inaugural class, looking out at a sea of strange, hopeful faces. "First lesson," she said, holding up a roll of duct tape, "is this: nothing is ever just what it seems." She ripped a length of tape and slapped it onto the podium. "This isn't tape. This is a seal, a weapon, a bridge, a promise. It's whatever you need it to be." She held up a fork next. "This isn't cutlery. This is a lockpick, a circuit jumper, a key." The students leaned forward wide-eyed. "We'll show you how to see the world differently," Leah said softly. "And once you do, you'll never see it the same way again." Not everyone in the Concord was happy. In the darker corners of the galaxy, whispers grew. The humans are making themselves indispensable. They've turned rebellion into a business. They're teaching us to misuse everything, including trust. Some feared that the library school was just another ploy, a way for humanity to seed chaos into the very heart of the Concord. And perhaps they were right. For in a hidden room deep below the school, behind locked doors and clever illusions, Fry and Leah met regularly with a small, trusted circle of humans. On the table before them lay a different tree, a black hologram, its leaves shimmering faintly. Leah tapped one of the leaves, which read simply, "Toothbrush, Starship Override Key, Classified." She looked at Fry. "Do they know?" she asked. Fry smirked. "Not yet." Leah raised an eyebrow. "And when they do?" Fry's smile widened. "By then, it'll be too late." Despite the whispers, the doctrine of responsible misuse spread. The Concord began rewriting its manuals and training programs. Military academies hosted misuse workshops taught by human veterans. Civic planners consulted human engineers on how to design cities that could adapt and fight using anything at hand. On the factory worlds of the Phylox, children now played a game called Human Trick, where they competed to invent the most creative new uses for everyday objects. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt alive again. Uncertain, yes, but alive. Rules were no longer written in stone. There were no more impossible problems. Leo walked through the halls of the library school one evening and paused at a mural painted by the first class. It showed the human tree in full bloom, its roots entwined with the symbols of dozens of alien civilizations. At the bottom was a simple inscription: "Nothing is only what it seems." Far away, in the high library, Usrith sat alone, a single human paperclip lying on the desk before them. For years they had tried to understand the species, to contain them, to suppress them. Now they understood. They picked up the paperclip and slowly bent it into a new shape, a tiny, perfect spiral. And as it gleamed in the light, Usrith allowed themselves a faint, crystalline smile. Perhaps, they murmured, "Misuse is simply another word for creation." Years later, a new cohort of alien students gathered for the opening lecture of the library school. Leah stood at the front of the class and held up an empty glass jar. "What's this?" she asked. A dozen voices answer at once. "A container, a trap, a signal beacon, a magnifier, a weapon." Leah smiled. "Good," she said. "But here's the truth. It's whatever you make of it. And so are you." And somewhere, deep among the stars, humanity continued to plant its seeds of chaos, creativity, and resilience, teaching the galaxy what it had always known. You can ban the tools. You can ban the toys. But you can never ban the mind.